week 6 of the fantasy football season, and here's the top 15 tight ends I'm ranking this week. Number 1, Travis Kelce, the Kansas City Chiefs. So Travis Kelce, we know he's the best tight end in football, but he's banged up as well now with a foot injury versus the Minnesota Vikings in week 5. But he's going to play in this game. More reports are coming out. We know he's the number 1 target in this offense that's starving for one of their wide receivers to step up and make some plays. But right now in a good matchup versus a Denver Bronco team that can't stop anyone. Kelce's easily number 1 this week. Number 2, Mark Andrews of the Baltimore Ravens. So Mark Andrews, he's only had that one patented game this season with a 2-touchdown game, over 70 yards at the Cleveland Browns in week 4. But this week a good matchup at the Titans, where the Titans, they're good against the run, but versus the pass, they can't stop anyone. So this week here, after a tough loss last week for this Baltimore Raven team, I think they go back to basics. I think they're going to try to force feed Mark Andrews in the passing game, and I think that's their best recipe for the remainder of the season. Force feed Mark Andrews in the middle of the field. Lamar picks his spots when he runs, and you got to get that running game. More carries as well with Gus Edwards and Justice Hill. Number 3, TJ Hawkinson and the Minnesota Vikings. So a great matchup this week at the Bears. More targets, I believe, are going to come Hawkinson's way, obviously, with Justin Jefferson out 4 weeks now with the hamstring injury. And we know Hawkinson is one of the better tight ends coming into the season. And now with an expanded role and more targets coming his way and a weak matchup at Chicago, it wouldn't be surprising to me if we could see Hawkinson being the top scorer this week at the tight end position. So with all those factors and a great matchup, even after the last 2 weeks, we haven't seen much out of Hawkinson. I have him at 3. Number 4, Sam Laporta of the Detroit Lions. So Laporta has been one of the best tight ends already in fantasy football in his first 5 games of his pro career. So right now, not a great matchup at Tampa Bay. They're bend but don't break type of defense and have a great linebacking crew. But right now, Sam Laporta is the number 2 option in this passing game behind Ross St. Brown. And we don't know if St. Brown's going to play in this game, but if he does, it doesn't. Sam Laporta is going to get the targets each way. He's a big red zone threat, and he's a matchup nightmare for linebackers and safety. So this week, even in a tougher matchup at Tampa Bay, like I said, being the number 2 option and possibly 1 if St. Brown's out, I got him at 4. Number 5, Evan Ingram of the Jacksonville Jaguars. Ingram and Trevor Lawrence, they've had good chemistry over the last year and change since Ingram signed a deal with his Jaguar team. And this week, a good matchup versus the Indianapolis Colts, where I think they can make plays in this game. They're going to go up and down the field, I think, for the most part, is Jacksonville. Even though this Colt defense isn't a horrible unit, we've seen guys have big performances versus them. And Trevor Lawrence in week 1 looked pretty decent versus this team. So Evan Ingram, he's been a matchup problem for the most part. He could line up anywhere in the formation. Here's Evan Ingram. And with guys like Christian Kirk and Calvin Ridley keeping the middle of the field open for him, I got him at 5. Number 6, George Kittle of the San Francisco 49ers. So Kittle finally had the breakout game versus the Dallas Cowboys in week 5, where he had 3 touchdowns in that one. And before that, he only had 1 good game in week 3 versus the Giants. 7 catches, 90 yards. So this week here, going to the dog pound in Cleveland, I think George Kittle could go out there, have another good ball game once again. And him and Brock Purdy last season, they did hook up a lot in the end zone. So this week, it wouldn't be surprising to me if Kittle could find the end zone again. Number 7, Dallas Goedert of the Philadelphia Eagles. So Goddard finally had the breakout game in week 5 at the Los Angeles Rams. 8 catches, 117 yards, and found the end zone. And this week, a good matchup at the New York Jets. Are the top 5 and give them fantasy points to tight ends on the season. So we know A.J. Brown's there, Devonta Smith, DeAndre Swift out of the backfield. A lot of mouths to feed, no doubt about it, in Philadelphia. But Dallas Goedert's another tight end that coming into the season, I had high hopes for him. In the first 4 weeks of the year, he didn't do much, but you're going to get these pop games here and there from Goddard, where he's going to go over 20 fantasy points, I believe. But this week, I don't think he goes over 20, but anywhere from 10 to 15, I think is definitely reasonable. Number 8, Darren Waller of the New York Giants. And Darren Waller, a lot of people draft him 4th, 5th round in fantasy leagues here. He's pretty much been a non-factor for the most part this year, and it's not 100% his fault, obviously. With Daniel Jones, he hasn't had time in the pocket, and he's been getting hit early and often where he can't even get the football out, is Daniel Jones. But this week at Buffalo, where I think there's going to be a lot of garbage time, and we don't know 100% if Daniel Jones is going to play in this game after the beatings he's taken, and he was going for a neck MRI. But this week here, even in a tougher matchup, but like I said, in a game where they're going to have to throw 40, 50 times possibly, is this Giant team. I have him at 8. Number 9, Kyle Pitts of the Atlanta Falcons. So finally, they utilized him well was this Atlanta Falcon team in that victory in Week 5 versus the Houston Texans. And we know Kyle Pitts is an athlete. We know they drafted him very high in the NFL draft a few seasons ago. And this kid could go out there and make plays. They just got to get him in the right positions and get him the football. And that's exactly what he did, over 15 PPR fantasy points in Week 5. So this weekend, a matchup with a potential shootout with the Commanders coming to town over there in Atlanta. I think Kyle Pitts can make plays once again. And they just got to scheme even plays to him, even if it's a little dig route or a little screen where he can make plays after the catch. So right now, I think this week, once again, we could see Pitts put back-to-back decent performances. And I got him in 9, number 10 staying in the same game. Logan Thomas of the Washington Commanders. So Thomas over the last few weeks has really broke out once again. And I know we saw it 2-3 seasons ago where Thomas was one of the better tight ends in fantasy football. But obviously health's been a problem, but him and Sam Howell have a good chemistry. He's been a red zone target and a third down target here for Sam Howell. And this week he had Atlanta indoor track in a ball game that could be a shootout, like I mentioned. I think Thomas once again could go out there and give fantasy owners a solid game. And I got him at 10, number 11, Cole Kmet of the Chicago Bears. Cole Kmet and Justin Fields, they have good chemistry and a good rapport since last season. And now this offense, they're starting to roll over there for this bad team. Last week, 15 fantasy points in PPR leagues. DJ Moore's definitely opened things up in the middle of the field for Cole Kmet to get single coverage or zone coverage. And this week, he had a great matchup versus the Minnesota Vikings that can't stop anybody pretty much. And we saw Travis Kelce, even though obviously Kmet's not in the same class as Kelce, go for 10 catches, 67 yards, and a touchdown out at 100% versus Viking defense. I think Kmet once again has a good ball game, and it wouldn't be surprising to me if week in and week out he starts bumping up even more this ranking board. Number 12, Dalton Schultz of the Houston Texans. At Dalton Schultz, it looked like it was a bust signing the first 3 weeks of the season, but the last 2 weeks he's found pay dirt with C.J. Stroud, and Stroud's a good quarterback. You don't turn the football over. He's got good poise. And now he's starting to find his tight end to go with Nico Collins and Tank Dell, who've been doing great work at the receiver position on the outside. So this week here, I know not an ideal matchup versus a solid, stout New Orleans Saints defense, but I think Dalton Schultz once again could put in a serviceable ball game. Even if it's, let's say, 5 catches, 40 yards, that's still a decent game in PPR leagues. Because like I've been saying, tight end's a pretty weak position, even though over the last few weeks, guys like Dalton Schultz, Cole Kmet, Logan Thomas have been emerging. So this week he's 12, number 13, his former teammate, Jake Ferguson of the Dallas Cowboys. So Ferguson, he's been a target machine so far this season. I know last week he didn't do anything, but no one in that Cowboy game did anything for that offense. Dak Prescott, he was horrible, 3 interceptions. They couldn't move the football, a lot of check down routes and stuff that wasn't working. And this week here, I think they got to open the playbook up. And Dak Prescott, like I've said, his best friend has been the tight end in this offense. He's the number 2 target, in my opinion, behind CeeDee Lamb is Ferguson. So this week in a good matchup with the Chargers where they don't stop anyone. Potential shootout, like I mentioned. I wouldn't be surprised if Ferguson has a good ball game and possibly finds double digits, but I'm holding him at 13. Number 14, Zach Ertz of the Arizona Cardinals. So Zach Ertz, he came off that knee injury pretty quickly and started week 1. And Zach Ertz, 8 or more fantasy points this season. 4 out of 5 games. So this week in a matchup where I think they're going to be trailing Angeles Rams, and it could be a solid shootout as well, possibly between these 2 teams here. And now with James Conner out of the lineup, I think they're going to be more pass first is this Arizona team. So Zach Ertz, we know, works the middle of the field. Hollywood Brown, he's taking the top off the defense that could open that team up. And even Michael Wilson, we've seen some things out of him and Rondell Moore. So right now, Zach Ertz in a matchup with a familiar foe in the division of Los Angeles in an indoor game, which is always a plus. I got him at 14, and the 15th and final tight end I'm ranking. We're staying in the same games. Tyler Higbee of the Los Angeles Rams. So Tyler Higbee, he's been a solid ball player for the last few seasons, and he's a favorite here of Matthew Stafford. And now with Puka Nacua and Kupp in the same lineup, Higbee's going to be roaming the middle of the field pretty much wide open and being ready to make plays. I know he's going to lose some targets, obviously, where Cooper Kupp's a target machine, and he gets open pretty much every play is Cooper Kupp. But anyway, good matchup versus the Cardinals. This could be a shootout over there in Los Angeles. And I think Higbee, he could put top 15 numbers up. So that's the top 15 tight ends I'm ranking for Week 6 of the fantasy football season.